Talk Show. I'm Ryley.
And I'm Ellie.
And today we had the chance to sit down with Mr. Kevin Crossman and Will Fugate. Kevin Crossman being of In Search of the Ultimate Mai Tai, and Will Fugate being from Tiki Classics. Kevin Crossman has been involved in the Tiki scene since the mid-1990s, periodically, and is most famous for his contributions to his blog In Search of the Ultimate Mai Tai.
Kevin is an avid chronicler of not only the history of the Mai Tai, but great Mai Tais around the world. We get into it more in the interview, but he runs a blog where he travels around, drinking other people's Mai Tais, giving them a rating, and has done a lot of work trying to figure out the best or the ultimate recipe for the ever-beloved Mai Tai.
We talk about different drinks, his opinions on the Tiki scene, but there's no one better to hear it from than from Kevin himself. So now on over to the interview.
And today we're speaking with Mr. Kevin Crossman. His blog is In Search of the Ultimate Mai Tai. He goes around taste testing different Mai Tais and chronicling the Mai Tai history. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is a pleasure. I know I used to be a podcaster in a former life, so it's always great to support folks who are doing this sort of thing. And it's a nice overlap here with the Tiki thing.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So talk to us a little bit about how you first got into Tiki. Is this something that has been around since your childhood in those formative years, or is this something you found later on in life?
Yeah, I got into Tiki from the music side in the 90s. So that was a time when the lounge revival was going, and I was interested in, sort of music. And so when lounge came, I started listening to those compilations that Capitol put out, and the first one was the Mondo Exotica one. And so I thought, like, okay, this is my music. It was similar to some of the bands like Oingo Boingo that had different kind of percussion instruments, and so it was a natural bridge for me. And so then I got into that music, and I thought, well, where would you want to listen to this music live? It was at a tiki bar, and so I got into sort of tiki that way. And then sort of probably the next question is, like, how did the Mai Tai thing start? Well, it's like, well, when you go to a tiki bar, what's the standard drink? A Mai Tai was the standard drink, so it sort of became the first thing I was looking at.
Very cool. So you talked there about, choosing the Mai Tai to be your drink of choice. You have not only gone around to several modern day bars, taste tested them and given them a score or rating, but you've also documented quite a bit of the Mai Tai history. What have you learned through all of your years of research?
Well, the blog originally, or the website, it was interesting because I had been doing a bunch of different, like, weird websites during this period when the web was new and all that. Lip Balm Anonymous was something I got a little bit of fame out of. But so I thought, well, I'm interested in Tiki. I'm interested in these bars. I want to go out and do something. And I thought, I'd heard that the Mai Tai was this amazing drink, and I went to a couple bars, and it really wasn't that good. And I thought, what is the big deal? And so then I went to Trader Vic's out in Emeryville, and I had a really great one there. I was like, okay, now I understand what this is all about. And so I thought, let's chronicle this drink, and again, in a very niche sort of way, and share good recipes and the history and all that sort of thing. And so I did that website for a while. And then I started having kids, and we didn't go out as much. And so then almost 10 years ago now, I started to get more into the scene, and rum was a much better situation than it was back in the 90s and early 2000s. Obviously, tiki bars had made a big comeback by then as well. And so I thought, well, I want to be involved with the community. Let me start doing the Instagram thing. So I did a lot of it was not reviews per se. It was like, I went here, I had this drink, I went home and I bought a new rum and I tried it in this cocktail or whatever, just both to learn from the different cocktails and all these other things, but also then to make connections with people and that sort of thing. And so, now almost 10 years later, yeah, I've learned a lot about, the history of the Mai Tai and other tiki cocktails, and been to a lot of tiki bars, around the world, I guess, technically. Europe and America and
Yeah.
Canada.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think I think your perspective is very fascinating because you were getting into it. This was about when you first started getting into tiki bars. This was the late '90s. I'm guessing mid to late '90s, and that was kind of the first rumblings of the craft cocktail renaissance, and like places like Chicago, New York, and places in Europe where people were starting to rediscover the Prohibition era cocktails. While tiki cocktails were still getting the thumbs down, going, no, those aren't very good. So your perspective is very uh, fascinating. So, we talk about the Mai Tai because that's what your blog is. Just starting the interview off, is there any other cocktails out there that you feel are still as equally misunderstood either by the tiki crowd or the larger craft cocktail crowd in the tiki world?
Hmm, that is a good question. I suppose um, the Planter's Punch probably is a drink that the average person wouldn't know what it is, or they might think it's just a bunch of orange juice and whatever, kind of like the Mai Tai is a bunch of orange juice and pineapple juice and
Yeah.
whatever. So I think that's one where uh, if you really know what it is, and you know the history of Caribbean cocktails, you see the Planter's Punch next to the daiquiri, next to the tea punch, next to a bunch of other drinks in sort of a similar sort of profile, right? It's rum, lime, and sugar, and then maybe a little something. In this case, it's Jamaican rum, not Cuban rum, that sort of thing. So I think that's a drink that probably a lot of people don't really, understand. Now, that being said, it's not as well known as something like a zombie or a Mai Tai or one of those kind of more famous cocktails. So in that respect, it's sort of a little bit under the radar, I suppose.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And I think, especially with the popularity of a book like Smuggler's Cove, which publicized Stephen Remsburg's version of it, it kind of goes back to that whole thing of, well, you go back to the very old version to the Planter's Punch from Jamaican recipes versus the modern ones. Which one do we go off of? It's kind of, well, choose your own adventure. Which one do you like?
Yeah.
And without a unifying specific recipe like the Mai Tai now, fortunately, is uh, after years and years of pulling teeth at bars of asking them to serve a 44 Mai Tai is now a very unified recipe. I can definitely see that, um, yeah, being one of those misunderstood Caribbean cocktails. I mean, you kind of hit on it, and with like the daiquiri and the Planter's Punch being like the tapestry of Caribbean cocktails. This is what tiki cocktails are all a part of. Is there any other cocktail that you feel like maybe as far as a basis of tiki doesn't get enough like respect in the same way that maybe a Planter's Punch or a daiquiri would?
I can think of drinks that maybe get too much respect, like a
Ooh,
like a
that's even better.
painkiller. Um,
I'm glad you said that. I
I
have
have
some
nothing wrong,
opinions.
nothing against a painkiller, but I think it gets too often lumped in with tiki. And like I was at Pagan Island, San Francisco one time. This pre-pandemic, so it was like after work, and a bunch of these financial dudes came in, you know, and the guy was like trying to impress his friends, like with the tiki bar, and he's like, painkillers all around. Like, okay, great,
Yeah.
Again, nothing wrong with a painkiller if that's what you like, but not exactly in the same kind of canon with the more complex exotic and tropical cocktails. But in terms of ones that are underappreciated, I mean, I think that something like the Disco Banana that they have at Zombie Village has gotten a little bit of publicity because it was in Matt Petreck's minimalist tiki book and some other things. I think that's a fabulous cocktail, but it's like nobody's heard of it, and why not? Because it's only a local thing, really.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. No, and I think you kind of mentioned it. Again, we're very fascinated with your perspective of how long you've been in tiki, but what we try to do here is we try to categorize and catalog the different stories of the tiki revival of people who got into it via cocktails or music or any which way. But I think we all can appreciate, no matter which way you got into it, is that new bars are opening up now, and they're opening up at almost breakneck speed. Every city has probably a major project ongoing, or has opened one in the last couple of years. Are there any specific trends that you're seeing when in your tiki travels? The trends of new bars, whether that's on the menu or the decor or anything. Yeah.
Well, I would say it's certainly become something where every town of a reasonable size typically can support a tiki bar if there's some sort of cocktail culture situation happening. So we see, at least in California, places like Paso Robles, which is a wine town, or Napa, which is a wine town, or Petaluma, which is a wine town, have a tiki bar in them because people go there and it's like a weekend type of getaway place. And then they go there, and some people like wine, but some people like to have a, a cocktail instead. And so it's known as a genre for cocktails. The same way an Irish bar would be a known genre, or, prohibition bar, something like that. And what I'm seeing, I think probably in the last 5 years, more and more of these sort of bar groups, that they have leases in these different places within the same town, and they have a prohibition bar, they have an Irish bar, they have a tiki bar. And so sometimes that's good when, not all of them are going to be equally successful all the time. And because it's part of a bar group, if one has a bad couple of months, that's not going to shut down, right? And vice versa. On the other hand, because they're corporate group owned, maybe they don't quite get the tiki thing the way somebody, who's really into it would do it. Someone who sort of grew up in the scene and is very committed to the scene. People like Martin Cate from Smuggler's Cove, or, Michael Thanos from Forbidden Island, something like that, where they're not just owning a tiki bar, they're like true believers in the genre, in the culture.
Yeah.
So more and more places, I'd say, these tiki bars that are opening are probably more likely to be corporate owned, and sometimes then need a little help from the local tiki people that, adjust things properly.
Yeah.
And make sure that they're doing things right. At the same time, hopefully those people aren't like being too overly critical about, like, look, they're trying. If it's not 1,000% like Smothers Cove or Beach Bum Berries, place, like, get them at least a little bit of slack. At least you now have a tiki bar in your town, where
Right.
before
Yeah.
you didn't.
I mean, and it is funny that you mentioned that, because I have one memory that pops up so specifically as what you're talking about. I remember, and I will not name the bar that I went to. Their drinks are they're 90% there. They're pretty close, but they're not exact. And I was sitting at the bar. I went by myself, just trying this place out. And there was somebody down the end of the bar. He goes like, no, that's not how you make that. That's not how you make that. And he was pretty drunk, and he was talking to the bartender. He's like, no, it's 3/4 ounce of this. And then the bartender just responded, that's how we do it here. And the guy started going on this whole thing, like, no. In 1939, this is exactly how it was made. And the bartender clearly was just like, I get paid hourly, and like trying to go, oh, very interesting. So yeah, it is kind of funny that you mentioned, like, cut these people a little bit of slack if at least you have one. Yeah, and not just a total tiki desert.
Right. And it's different if the bar was like, well, see, like, my thing is I cut people, or Mai Tais, a lot of slack depending on where it is, right? So if I walk into a Chili's and they have a Mai Tai on their menu, and it's not Trader Vic's 1944 Mai Tai, and I complain to the bartender, one of us is the,
The jerk.
complainer, a-hole, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it'd be me because I'm in the wrong place for that.
Right.
Right. But if you have our Mai Tai is world famous, we can think about a bar on the waterfront in San Diego that might fit this bill. That our Mai Tai is world famous and it's the best. Well, you might get a little bit more criticism from me about that sort of thing than, if you don't say stuff like that. And like in your example, if you're arguing about a 1/4 ounce or half an ounce or whatever, and if the bartender was like, no, this is how it is made since, whatever, then you can have an argument that might be potentially okay as a customer. But, yeah, look, yeah, take it up with the manager maybe, but, it's not cool.
I go off of an erosion technique, is that, like, yeah, you could come in with a sledgehammer and try to be like, this is how you make it. No, just a small, slow, like, hey, maybe try it like this. Or talk to the management when they're there one night. Hey, have you tried it this way instead? And eventually they go like, yeah, I think we're gonna change that. Like, I don't know. I've had a little bit more success doing that than other people. Yeah, getting very irate at a bartender who they're just trying to go home.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Dr. Funk in San Jose opened about 4 years ago, and it was owned by a bar group. They own like literally a bunch of bars all around this block that they're on, and they hired a really great team. and they had a really, really good cocktail program when they opened, and it went on for about a year and a half, 2 years almost. And they had a, change in staffing, and the people they hired to replace the people that left were not as good, definitely didn't understand the genre. And um, I was there probably for 3 or 4 months, and I had like pretty lousy drinks through that period. And I was there one night, I was with somebody else. I ordered a Mai Tai, tasted fine, not great, but fine. And and the guy next to me had a Mai Tai, and it was really, really terrible. And they were having bartenders who were free pouring. And basically, I don't, like I just mentioned, I don't like to just lay into people on every little nitpicky whatever. But I did go a little bit more editorially oriented on my write-up on my visit that time, and basically said to Dr. Funk, look, do you want to be a party bar? Just say you want to be a party bar, and I will not have those kinds of expectations. But you launched as a craft cocktail bar, and you own other craft cocktail bars in your bar portfolio. I expect the drinks to be reasonable. I expect you to, use jiggers to measure your
Right.
drinks and all that. And long story short, they've turned that ship around, and they're on a really good path now. Their quality's gone way back up, and they're doing a lot of cool things now down there. So, at some point, you as the customer, you have to give them fair, reasonable feedback that, look, this is not what I expect for my $18 Mai Tai or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So, since you've been into the tiki world for a few decades now, let's go back to thinking about those first tiki bars you visited and those first experiences. How do they compare to the modern day tiki bar you walk into, for better or worse?
Well, part of this is a better question if you could go back in a time machine and ask me, the younger version of me, because some of those memories now are a little hazy. But the 90s, yeah, the 90s and early 2000s, you had a few places that were carryovers like Trader Vic's, and a few places that were newer, but they were not like the good tiki bars now. I mean, that old adage about a rising tide lifts all boats, it's so true with tiki now, especially with the internet and people, word of mouth, Facebook groups, Yelp reviews, or whatever. If you open a lousy tiki bar, the word is gonna get out.
Yeah.
And so, there was not a lot of great places then. And part of it was just the culture around cocktails at that time still wasn't that good until we had the cocktail revolution, and didn't hit tiki bars until later. And partially too is rum was not in a good place back in that period. There was really not much available besides Picardy and Captain Morgan, of course, but Appleton was like the one good rum. There was not like a lot of great rums out there. And you know, you can make a lot of good drinks with average rums if you know what you're doing, but obviously it's better if you've got all these kind of different variety of rums, cane spirits, all kinds of other things that you have today. Again, just much more of an interesting experience when you go to the bars and all that. So from a cocktail side, it's been like night and day. And then just in terms of being able to, the experiential portion of these bars, I mean, we can certainly thank social media, Instagram, TikTok, all that. If your bar looks like $1 million, it's a way to attract customers in a way that maybe it wasn't as much back in those days too. So from a decor standpoint, from a cocktail standpoint, it's so much better. Even the lousy ones today would be great from back then.
Yeah. And I think you kind of hit on it. I'm a major rum geek. When I was at False Idol, I crossed way too many off there. Well, I say, is there a way too many when you're talking about rum? But I certainly handed over a lot of cash to that bar. And you kind of hit on a point that I feel very, very strongly about, is that you do look at the original Don the Beachcombers, Trader Vic's locations, what they had in their cellars as the straight rums, and they did have some amazing stuff that we now, put on this pedestal, and in the case of the Mai Tai, the Wray and Nephew 17, like
Mhm.
things like that. But as far as the diversity in the rum category right now, in my opinion, after looking at a lot of the old bar menus, I mean, there's probably nothing like what is being imported to the United States right now in terms of age, variety, country. I think any which way you want to cut it. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, or maybe you want to dispute that claim, but that's just my possibly ill-informed 2 cents.
Well, I think, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, you'd have a pretty good variety from the traditional, rum producing countries. There wasn't much happening in the United States at that point. And there were a few brands around Myers and Lemonheart who were like the brokery types, but yeah, there's so much more variety now. Now, I think it does vary depending on what state you're in. If you're in a control state,
Yeah.
obviously, I'm in California, and so we get it good because it's a big market. So brands that can only be in one place or another are going to gravitate to those big states like Florida, New York, Texas, California. So, I mean, if you're a consumer, maybe you have to cross state lines to get, some good rum at a store or whatever. And, sometimes you can do a mail order. I know it depends, again, state by state.
We definitely experienced that here in Maryland. Like, our selection is not as great, but living on the East Coast in those smaller states that drive to another state to get another selection isn't too bad. But the mail order is not allowed in Maryland and heavily controlled.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is a bummer.
It is.
I remember living in California and I wanted to have like a party on Friday, and so I ordered Karuba on Monday, and it was there by like a couple days later. I'm like, all right, nice, here we go. Now we drive up to I mean, I say New Jersey, but we live in northern Maryland, so it's maybe like an hour away. And we pick up all our fancy rums over there, like the Clement sake cast that they did like 250. I picked up a bottle of that recently.
Nice.
Just stuff like that. But yeah,
it's not at the neighborhood liquor stores here.
no.
And they all close by 9. So you got to get what you're
Wow.
getting and know what you came for. So
Unfortunately, Maryland, a lot of Maryland's liquor laws come from Prohibition era and have not been revised since. So at least we're not in Virginia. Kind of when you said the control states, if anyone's listening to this in Virginia, I'm sorry. Yeah. So kind of back to the Mai Tai. One of the things, kind of the meat and potatoes of the Mai Tai is obviously the rum. That's what we care about. That's what we want. And that's what makes a good Mai Tai from a bad Mai Tai. I mean, it all has to be balanced. But what I'm curious about is, how did you come about devising your 4-rum blend? And if you could elaborate on that a little bit of what goes into it, and then how you came up that for the viewers or listeners.
Sure. So yeah, the ultimate Mai Tai rum blend. It's Appleton 12, Smith and Cross, Plantaray, Jamaica. Those are all Jamaican rums. And then OFTD, which is a blended rum, mostly Guyana, Barbados, and Jamaica too. And I had originally done a 4-rum blend using different rums, but like Kaloa was one of them. It's a dark rum from Hawaii that is very vanilla forward. And so I was trying to look for something a little bit drier, and I just came up with these 4 rums. And then I'm like, oh, that was really good. And then I kept trying other combinations and they weren't as good. So I'm like, okay, that's it. But, these are 4 rums. The average, total ABV is over 50%, because I want to taste the rum and I want it to be boozy. And, the moniker Ultimate Mai Tai sort of works with that sort of vibe, right? Like if you want to graduate to the ultimate, you want something that is going to be a little bit rum forward. And I don't know that I'd give that to somebody who's like, hey, I've never had a Mai Tai before, show me what it's like. I probably wouldn't choose that rum blend because it might be a little too much, in their face. But, that's kind of how it came about. But, I would say when I go to a bar and I have a bad or not so good Mai Tai, it's usually not the rum, even if they're using, like light rum, dark rum, like Bacardi and Myers or something. It's probably not the rum that's causing me to not love it. It's probably more likely bad orgeat, or maybe too much lime is often what I get sometimes, if they, or a balance too high.
Yeah.
So, all those ingredients really make a big difference, one way or the other. And, I was at Smothers Cove back a few years back, and I always had a great Mai Tai there. And I ordered one and I tasted it and I thought, man, something is off. It tastes funny. And I tasted it again, and I was like still something off. And I asked the bartender, did you change your orange curacao? And he said, yes, we did. We're using this different brand. I'm like, not an improvement. And so they ended up switching back to the Ferrand dry curacao. So sometimes even the orange curacao can make a difference if it's just not incompatible with all the other ingredients that are in there.
It is funny that you mentioned that because I had a very similar experience at False Idol. I remember I think I used to go there quite often. I used maybe like every other week or maybe once a month or something. And I remember one time I went and I always started with a Mai Tai. Like it was always the drink that kind of signify, okay, it's the weekend and walk off the rest of work. And for whatever reason, this one time that I had it, it was perfect. It was the drink I wanted. Everything was perfect. I know they use denizen merchant reserves there, and
Mhm.
you could taste that, you could taste the lime, everything was perfect. And then I think I wasn't able to go for like maybe like a month and a half or so, and I go back and I ordered another Mai Tai, and it just wasn't it was good, it just wasn't that. And I knew that was kind of a one-off time, and I'm drinking it, and the more I kind of drink it, the more I'm going, okay, it's fine, like I don't really love it. And I ask them like, hey, did you guys do something different? They're like, yeah, we changed the orgeat in it, or orgeat, or however you want to pronounce it. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't prefer my drinks very sweet. I like them more rummy or maybe a little bit limey. And I know it's different strokes for different folks, but fortunately, I think they changed it back. Probably not at my behest. I don't think I'm that important. But yeah, just you're right. Those minimal changes can absolutely change uh, the overall quality of a Mai Tai or just a drink in general you're coming at a cocktail with 12, 13 ingredients.
Right. Well, right. You'd think like a Mai Tai is so simple, right? Because it's only 5 ingredients. And some people don't even use a rock candy syrup or demerara or whatever. They just use orgeat. But but when you switch the formula, it's not just that you're switching the formula, but the bartender has to remember the switch. So I was at Rumba a few years back, and they had just switched their orgeat, and they were using a quarter ounce rather than half. But the bartender forgot and used half ounce, and that was too much.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is weird. And then I'm not normally a person to like, throw something back or whatever, but I was with somebody who was a little bit more um assertive in that way. And he asked, are you sure this is okay? And then the server came over and she's like, you know what? I bet they didn't use the right measurement because we just switched and then they fixed it and it was great. So, you never know. Sometimes it might be one of those things where they've made an ingredient change and they forgot to change the recipe.
Yeah.
So with your blog, you go around, tasting these Mai Tais and giving them a rating. How did you devise the point system for rating and trying to find that ultimate Mai Tai?
So with the Mai Tais, I do a top 10 in the world, which is like a permanent list. And then I have each year I do top 10, or last year it became top 25 of, Mai Tais. And I'm just ranking them. So I'm not doing a points per se. It's just like, you know what, that one's better, this was better, that sort of thing. And doing it just that way. I do have a Tiki bar rating, which has a different factor. And I think part of that was I kept getting these questions, or I saw questions on, in online, people would ask like, what's the best bar in San Francisco? Well, like, what is important to you? Cocktails? Then you should go to Smuggler's Cove. An elaborate decor, you should go to the Tonka Room. But if it's depending on what is important to you, you might rate things, higher or lower. And so by being transparent about those ratings, like, people can make their own decision. Like, oh, I don't care about cocktails so much. So if the cocktails aren't that great, I'll just ignore that column. And now this one has a higher rating, that sort of thing. But that's all I'm doing with the Mai Tais is just, are they good? Is it better than the other one? And just doing sort of a running list each year. And then that top 10 list is just whatever, the go-tos that I've had, and all my travels or whatever. And if the place goes out of business, they get dropped from the list, obviously, and we got to put somebody new in. Or if they make a change, and then I'll, do that too.
Okay. Yeah. So it's the S&P 500 at Tiki. You know, you're out of business, you move up. Well, I'll be your first investor in that if you'd like. You know, I think we kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier. I think we were kind of talking about the classic rum list and everything. And you know, I'm curious in your perspective because obviously you do a lot of research into this of the old and the new. In your opinion, who I mean, I know it's impossible to say definitively because we weren't there in 1950 or whenever, but based on the at least the rum list, at least the availability of decor, all of these things, if you had to kind of stack up of the who had it better almost, the vintage or the modern, kind of who's getting the better like absolute tiki experience in your opinion?
That's a good question. I think there's a little bit of a pro and con thing, and it back in the 50s, a lot of those places were very formal dining room experiences, fine dining, probably relatively more expensive than even more expensive places today would have been. So if you like that formality, maybe they had it better then. If you don't like that formality, maybe we have it better now. Of course, our whole culture is a lot more casual and in terms of how people dress back, compared to the 50s. There's a lot of other factors. I mean, if you read Trader Vic's books, he was certainly a man of his era in terms of the way he would refer to people who work for him, by names that we probably wouldn't, choose today. So in that respect, there was a little bit of that from, how things were in the old days. But I mean, I think that's the nice thing about the Renaissance we're having right now with tiki bars and these sorts of restaurants is that it's now approaching the heyday in terms of the quality, the availability that more and more places around the country have good places to visit. In fact, it used to be like a small handful of places you'd want to go, but now there's too many. You can't see them all in one road trip just
Yeah.
because you'd have to be there for a month or something to try to hit all the really good ones. So I mean, in a way, we've kind of pretty good now too.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because it's if the three of us were zapped back to 1960 and went to Trader Vic's with all of our Aloha shirts or whatever you'd like to wear, they would tell you to turn around and come back with a jacket. They would tell you,
And a tie probably too, right?
yeah, they would say you're not coming in. I think
I don't know that my overalls would make the cut.
yeah, I think they would tell you maybe whatever farm you came from, go scrounge something up. It is very interesting. I mean, I look back and personally my favorite, at least either logo or the way that the original bar is laid out, and I swear I'm not just being a contrarian on this one, is the Luau 400 in New York. A classic bar, and it's right next to Broadway, so you had a lot of the classic Broadway producers or actors and actresses go there, and every time you see somebody there, they're drinking out of the bowl, but they're not wearing their costumes, they're not kicking back. They probably got off their show, changed into their suit or their dress, and then headed over to the Luau 400. So you did kind of hit on that as far as more of a casual culture. And another thing is that tiki bars have also gotten significantly smaller when you stack them up to Trader Vic's Emeryville, which opened in the 70s, or basically almost any classic like tiki palace, with the exception of the original Don the Beachcombers. So I'm curious to see places like the Max's South Seas or other major places. Do you see that as a possibility of a trend of these major tiki spots, the one that really set themselves aside in terms of the size, possibly coming back in the near future?
I think it is really tough to have a large restaurant
Yeah.
in any genre these days. So, and Max's has had its own sort of roller coaster situation, and obviously COVID didn't help their thing. So I don't know. I mean, I think we'll see, right? If the Mai Tai starts really killing it like they were doing back in the late 50s and early 60s, maybe someone takes a chance on that. But I think it is probably more likely that if we can have more medium-sized places that incorporate both food and drinks, we should be, that's still better than nothing. Better
Yeah.
than, the sort of tiki bar off to the side in a Chinese restaurant, or, dive bar type tiki bars that you sometimes see. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. No, kind of changing gears a little bit. So you are known for your opinions on the Mai Tai, but I know you're also a fan of the Navy grog. I mean, and again, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
Could you tell the listener a little bit, what do you look for? Like if you're going to do like the one sip test of a Navy grog or a Mai Tai when you go into a bar, is there any other cocktails that you either do that with, or specifically like what do you look for when it comes to the Navy grog?
Yeah, well, daiquiri is often one of those tests of a bartender or a bar about how they make stuff. But the Navy Grog is interesting because, the Don the Beachcomber version with honey and the ice cone, and then Trader Vic, his leaned into pimento dram, and he used the rock candy stick.
Mhm.
And it's this sort of myth, right? You put the rock candy stick and you're supposed to stir it to add more sweetness. Have you ever tried doing that? And
I
then
did it
you
false idol.
you could stir that thing for 5 minutes and then pull it out, and there's the rock candy is the same. The reason
Yeah.
it looks like ice from this far away, like the old cone, but it takes that long to drop into the drink rather than having to prepare ice cones and that sort of thing. So um yeah, I did a little write up on the Ultimate Navy Grog, and basically my take was I'd love heavy on the honey, but also incorporate the pimento, sort of a blend of these two famous or traditional Navy grog styles, putting them together. And I like it, a little heavier on the syrupy side, but then I'm
Mhm.
going to add, heavier rums like the Ultimate Mai Tai rum, Demerara rums into that, so that it sort of balances that stuff out a little bit, and maybe a little less on the citrus on average. So, to me, if it's got a lot of flavor and it's, well balanced and it doesn't have any sort of like the rum taste bad or the lime taste bad, I'm down with, a lot of people doing something cool. I don't have I'm not I'm snobby about the Mai Tai, but that is about the only drink that I'm kind of snobby about.
Fair enough. I mean, unfortunately, I'll say I am drinking Mai Tai right now, but the recipe really came from somebody who knows what he's talking about. I used Appleton 12 and Zaymaca and OFT and Smith and Cross. I heard the guy really knows what he's talking about.
All right.
But
So you have your blog, and you've done some seminars at these large tiki events like Tiki Oasis. Is there anything coming up that people can look forward to?
I don't have any gigs per se. I've done a little bit of writing for Exotica Modern magazine.
Mhm.
And so almost every issue, you probably see something from me in there, music review or a feature article. So I do have something coming in the next issue on that. Right now, don't have any gigs per se to promote, so to speak, but I'm always interested in doing that stuff, as if the opportunity comes across.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Is there anything else that you want to get out to the listeners as far as like, I know everyone can find your information via your website, but is there anything else you want to say like in the Tiki world, or the Kevin Crossman seal of approval, or anything else you want to add?
Sure. The one thing that I kind of came up with, in terms of some of my research that really blew away some of the stuff that I continue to see written down in books that you would think would be better researched, is, the Mai Tai was introduced in 1944 at the Trader Vic's in Oakland. And you get sort of this myth from the Trader Vic's side that became this immediate sensation and caused the worldwide rum shortage, which of course it did not. The brand Nephew was a very limited rum. And when they ran out, it wasn't because they had, there was some sort of viral cocktail hit in the Bay Area. It was because they only made so many bottles of that thing because it was a weird, war related release. So, so Mai Tai was not this huge hit, but we all know it became a hit in Hawaii. That's why the drink is still very synonymous, sort of like the national cocktail of Hawaii, right? And people think that Trader Vic added pineapple juice, and that was why it became a big hit. But there's absolutely no published recipes for Mai Tai before 1960 that include pineapple juice as an ingredient in the Mai Tai. And certainly by the end of the 50s, it was already notorious as being, this very breakout cocktail hit in that region, and then, throughout the rest of the world, basically by that point. So that's always the thing I always want to like dispel myths on, is that the Mai Tai that became world famous was not the pineapple juice Mai Tai, but it also wasn't the 1944 Mai Tai, because Vic did change the formula a little bit when he moved it out to Hawaii by not using 15-year-old Jamaican rums, because that would be hard to get out to Hawaii in that period. He used a light rum and a dark rum, but it was a lot of rum, and it was still in balance with all the other traditional Mai Tai ingredients. And had that exotic name. If it was not called Mai Tai, I don't know that we'd be talking about that drink today, at least not in this context, because people went to Hawaii and they thought, "Oh, this is a Polynesian sounding name," but the drink still had to live up to it, and it was very well balanced, very different, very rum forward, more so than a lot of the drinks during that period, because it had usually 3 ounces of rum in it, so people knew it was like, okay, that's the one you want, because you're on vacation, you could use a little extra rum.
Yeah. And so I'm sure, one last question maybe for me, and I'll put that as one last question in parentheses, but I know you did a write-up on it, but I'm sure some of our listeners are interested. Appleton 17. You've had an Appleton 17 Mai Tai, I'm sure.
Uh-huh.
Can you give us a brief little description of that, and maybe possibly a little review?
Sure. So the original Mai Tai rum, according to Trader Vic, was the Ray and Nephew 17-year-old Jamaican rum. And it was known for being, besides 17 years old, so a lot of age on it, very rich type of rum that would be great in a rum forward cocktail like a Mai Tai. And so after Trader Vic published the original recipe and all that stuff, people had this sort of like mythical quality for this rum because it was the original rum, and people don't focus on what was the original orgeat so much, but or what did limes taste like back in the 40s and 50s. But that being said, it was kind of a cool sounding story with this original rum, and it had this interesting number 17. You don't see that on rum labels too often. And so Appleton, Ray and Nephew bought Appleton years and years ago, and so they're the sort of overall company. But Appleton is really the premium brand for that company now. They make Karuba, they make the Ray and Nephew Overproof, but Appleton is the premium brand. And so they put together a 17-year-old Jamaican rum release a couple of years back, Appleton 17 Legend. And it was different from a lot of the other Appleton rums in that it was 100% pot still. It was 49%, so it's a little bit boozier, but still not overly boozy than their regular 12, 15, 21-year-old releases. And it got a lot of notoriety because it was finally, supposedly, a rum from Appleton in the style of that original rum. Now, if you've never tasted the original, you can't do any comparison, right? But it was a pretty damn good rum, and it really was really good in a Mai Tai if the bar made it correctly. Because I've had a couple Appleton 17 Mai Tais at places where they didn't quite get the balance right, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like Smuggler's Cove, I know Martin Kate was he was pushing, Joy and all the people at Appleton to really like do a rum like this, do a rum like this, do a rum like this. And he finally did it. And so Smuggler's Cove of course, had a bunch of bottles and had the rum there. And, Smuggler's Cove for years and years was sort of like an example of the kind of like gold standard Mai Tai, right? Everybody knows that's the place to go. And so when I went there to have the Appleton 17, I ordered a regular Mai Tai and the Appleton 17. And man, I can tell you that Appleton 17 that they made was so good. It made their regular Mai Tai taste like garbage. I mean, in comparison, it was not terrible, but it was so much better. And everything else is the same, right? Same orgeat, same lime juice, same ice. Everything's the same except this rum, and it was so much better. So yeah, that Appleton 17 really made a great Mai Tai. So I know there are still some places. I heard Sunken Harbor Club in Brooklyn still has some, and that is a good Mai Tai there. So if you're looking for some Appleton 17, that they might still have it, that'd be a place people could go to and still get it.
Yeah, I think I regret to say I think I had the opportunity to. I think at Green Zone in DC.
Yeah.
I think they had it, and I was like, no, I think I'm good. I think I'm good on it. And now I'm kicking myself, so I might have to head up to Manhattan. I might have to take the bus trip up there, and and actually try it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was an expensive bottle to purchase, and so
Yes.
therefore it was expensive when you would order it places. I haven't seen it for less than, well, I was going to say I have not seen it for less than $100 as in a Mai Tai format. Although there's a place in San Francisco that for some reason is selling it at cost, so it's like $40, which is ridiculous.
Wow.
But
Don't
anyway,
tell the viewers, don't tell anyone who's listening where that is, because I might have to take a trip out there.
it's on the blog. It's
Oh, fair
but
enough.
anyway,
Secret's out, everyone.
yeah. But the Smothers, had it, and it was like it was going to be expensive, and I was like, is it worth it to spend that much money for one cocktail? Especially relative to the cost of the bottle if you had purchased it.
Yeah.
But then I thought, if I don't have it, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I am in the Mai Tai game, so if people made a different decision, I have no aspersions or whatever. It's probably a financially a sound choice.
Yeah, fair enough. I think when we went there, I think I ordered their zombie at like maybe noon. Which wasn't.
We
So
went for brunch.
Yeah, if we're talking about bad choices, I should have made the $100 Mai Tai over a zombie at noon choice. So, live and learn. Lesson learned now.
You did try the Hampton 8 Marks the same day, though, and that was a really interesting rum experience.
Yes, I did nerd out over that for way too long. So, one of the segments we like doing, especially with some of our longer form interviews, is kind of our fast final favorites. If you'd like to participate in that,
Absolutely.
1 minute on the clock. We're just going to rapid fire a ton of questions at you and see how many we can get through.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I'm going to get Ellie to
set up the timer here.
I feel like I know some of the answers here. I'm not going to ask you what your favorite drink is because I think something gives it away for me.
All right. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right.
Go ahead.
Favorite rum right now?
Appleton 12.
Favorite element of a tiki bar?
Cocktails.
A bit reluctant on that one, but I'll accept it. Favorite drink that's not a Mai Tai?
Favorite drink is just go banana.
Okay.
All right. Favorite Mai Tai riff you've ever had and where?
Mai Tai riff. Wow. Well, the one that comes to mind, I did a banana one at a home tiki bar that a friend of mine had, and we kind of worked on it a little bit together. So banana Mai Tai.
Very
Okay.
cool.
Favorite classic bar?
Trader Vic's, Emeryville.
Favorite tiki event?
Tiki Con when they were running was so well run, perfect size, it was great.
And best city other than San Francisco for tiki?
Orange County.
There we go, and that's your minute.
Awesome.
Mr. Crossman, thank you so much for sitting with us.
Well, thanks
And,
for having me, and good luck with the show, and look forward to future interviews with other notable figures in the scene. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you again to Kevin Crossman for joining us on this week's episode and providing not only your valuable insight into the Mai Tai historically and as a fantastic drink today, but as to our tiki culture as a whole. This week, unfortunately, I missed out on interviewing our artist spotlight guest. So over to Ryley for that introduction.
I had a great time sitting down with Will Fugate of Tiki Classics in Katiki. Will is a man with a plan, and he has plenty of designs, and the issue is that we talk about is not enough time, but what he does produce is some of the best tiki mugs around. We talk about their affordability and availability. We talk about some of his innovative designs, taking inspiration from classic tiki bars and Polynesian restaurants and combining that with some of the more modern takes on things. Will also makes lamps and plenty of other things to keep him busy, so make sure to check out his Instagram and social media and all that stuff.
Sounds like you guys had a great time, so let's get into the interview.
Aloha and welcome back to our Artist Spotlight. Today's guest, we have Will Fugate in Las Vegas, Nevada, owner and operator of Tiki Classics and Katiki. Will, how you doing?
Good. How are you, man? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing great, and we appreciate you having talking with us, I should say. So,
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
if anyone is not familiar with your work or doesn't follow you on Instagram, I think you have to be one of the busiest guys around. If you're on his pre-sale, we were talking about this a little bit before the show. If you're on any of his pre-sales, he sends out his email with the updates, and I think you're balancing you're balancing a lot of projects. I won't say way too many, but let's start with, how did you get into Tiki?
Oh, how did I get into Tiki? Oh, that's $1 million question. I've been asked that question before, and it's hard for me to pinpoint an exact moment, but there are little bookmarks throughout my life that I think kind of led all up to it. I grew up in Florida, in the Daytona Beach area, and my third grade elementary school was right on the beach in Ormond Beach, Florida. Like, we looked at the ocean out of our front door. It was pretty amazing. And this was many, many years ago. And we used to drive by on the school bus every morning a place called Julian's, which is a very famous old Tiki style building. It wasn't a Tiki bar. It was like an upscale steakhousey place, but it had this very distinctive, like, tall A-frame building with all kinds of cool paintings outside of it.
Oh, yeah.
Very Polynesian in look, not a Polynesian restaurant. And I have vivid memories of me staring at that every day on the school bus and thinking it was the coolest building I ever saw. So there are little nuggets like that. And also, we had a place in Daytona called the Hawaiian Inn, which is a very iconic mid-century Tiki temple hotel, which I spent a lot of time in as a kid. We would always go use their pool. And as an adult, I would drink adult beverages by their Tiki bar at their pool, which was a typical Florida Tiki bar, just a bunch of clown masks and bamboo and thatching and frozen crappy drinks that we thought were awesome because we just didn't know. And those were kind of the seeds that were planted. And also, growing up in that area, I always went to very nautical themed seafood places. And the more nautical and the more it felt like you were in like a captain's quarters on a pirate ship. The more dark and just very nautical it felt, the more I loved it. And I always loved those places. And I think those seeds just kind of were planted in me. Was surrounded by all this vintage Tiki and didn't even realize what it was. And then I wasn't one of I'm not one of these OG guys who got back in the Tiki revival in the early 2000s. None of those guys. I got into it about hardcore probably about 10 years ago. After the first time I went to Frankie's Tiki Room here in Las Vegas. That was I wasn't familiar with the Tiki scene, and I was actually a limo driver at the time, which we could do a whole podcast on those stories. Here in Vegas. I could write many books for with the things I saw. Me and my limo driver buddies in our tuxedos at 3 a.m. got off work and went to this Frankie's Tiki Room we'd driven by 100 times, and went in and was like, holy crap, like, what is this? This place is crazy. Yeah. And we probably just drank beers, I'm sure, because we just didn't know what we had no idea. And I remember talking to some friends, like, you got to see this bar, Frankie's, man. And then I was always into kind of mid-century style and history and vintage things. And I was hanging out at Viva Las Vegas a lot, which is our big rockabilly weekend here, which is this coming week, actually. And a lot of crossover there. So just a lot of little seeds that were planted from third grade until about 10 years ago, until I really discovered it. And then it just kind of took over my life, Yeah. There wasn't that aha moment where I was like, oh, this Tiki thing is cool. Just little bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah. Steady pressure, and then eventually it blows the doors off. And then you make a home bar. Something like Tiki Classics. So
yeah.
So speaking of that, so you said it's been about 10 years since you got into it. So, you're at the point where you're at Frankie's. How did you go from sitting in bars to, all right, I want to make something? Have you always been artistic, or did you feel that draw to explore that side later on when you got into the Tiki scene?
Zero art experience of any kind. Can't even draw a stick figure, like none. Never took an art class. I took a pottery class in high school, in 1992. That was literally the only time in my life my hands had ever touched clay. I didn't know anything about it, nothing. And then my good friend Mike Biggs from Biggs Tiki, he knew I was into tiki, and he's one of the most artistic people I know. He can do anything. He decided he wanted to make tiki mugs out of the blue, and he asked my advice on styles and what to do and some reference stuff. And I started talking to him, and I was watching him do it. And I always had this idea to recreate these 12-inch ceramic tiki statues from the 1960s from a company called Jamar Mallory. It was like a hobbyist mold. People would make it at ceramic classes, like the Color Me Mine of their day. And I always thought that somebody should recreate those and make them cool with lava and do some weird, cool stuff. And I saw what Mike was doing. And I was kind of watching how his process was. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
What the hell? What the hell? And I literally went out and bought a kiln, which was not cheap. And I bought all the supplies, and I watched millions of hours of YouTube videos and just started making it. And the first batch came out really cool. And I was like, maybe I should sell these for a couple of bucks. People will probably want these. And I listed them on my Instagram, and they sold immediately. And I was like, whoa, like they sold instantly. And I was kind of like taken aback, like, wow, people were actually seeing this and want this. So I just started making more. And before you know it, now I have a shop full of projects and orders that I can't get caught up on. Yeah. So that's how it started. It's all Mike Biggs' fault.
Yeah.
I blame it all on him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. If he was the one that really kicked things off, he deserves the blame then.
I'm telling you. And then he put out his first big tiki mug release. Me and him teamed up on the design, and he put my Tiki Classics, my new name, on the bottom of the mug.
Yeah.
So that first Aku Aku tribute mug that he made was a collab between me and him. He did all the work. I just helped him, kind of gave him the idea, kind of figured out how to do it. And he put my name on the bottom of the mug. And once I saw my name on a mug, that lit the fire. Like, I need to do these too. I need to make, like, it's all his fault.
Yeah.
Anytime I have problems, I blame it on Mike.
So the molds that you were talking about, is that the coup that you're still do now?
The big 12-inch coup. Yeah, I do those now. I'm not making any currently because I need to get caught up on other things, but I still make those. That's always been my best seller. I've sold many hundreds of those things, and they're very popular. Yeah.
So when did just for out of curiosity, so when you start selling these, when did Tiki morph into Tiki Classics? Like the actual you put the name on it, and now you're adding stuff under that series.
Yeah, well, the goal initially, because I'm a vintage tiki guy. Since I got into tiki, that's always been my passionate obsession, is vintage tiki, vintage mugs, vintage ceramics, anything to do with vintage tiki. That's just my jam. And when I started making things, my goal was to kind of reimagine some vintage tiki imagery and ceramics and into a modern version that I could make myself. That's how it started with the coup lamps and a couple other projects after that. Slowly, I started adding some other things that aren't necessarily fit into that category, like a banana bob and a UFO and things like that. But I still, at the core, that's why it's called Tiki Classics, is that everything I make is some sort of riff or reimagination of a vintage piece that I'm a fan of.
Yeah,
that was the goal. Yeah, and like I said, I veered off from that a little bit with some other projects. But yeah, that's going to start going back in the other direction here pretty soon. I have some things lined up that are really going to fit into that mold. No pun intended. Yeah.
No, that's what I love about your style, because I'm in the same boat. I love classic tiki. Nothing wrong with any of the things that people are doing for like the more modern takes or some of the South Florida style stuff that you kind of talked about. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. But it's definitely that 50s and 60s is really, that's
the best.
That's the bread and butter. That's for me.
It's the best. It's the best. That's what started it all. That's the core and basis of all the stuff we're into. It splinters off into different genres and Disney and sci-fi and horror, and you can make the arguments left and right over what's tiki and what's not. I have my opinions on that. I keep it to myself because it's just none of my business. I don't care what you're into.
Yeah.
Like my business name is Tiki Classics, and I made a banana mug with a bob face on it. You can argue all day long that's not tiki, and I wouldn't disagree with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I know people love tiki bob, and they would love that. I keep looking up because I'm staring at three of them over the camera.
Well, I have
Yeah,
one
so I mean,
little off camera too.
Oh, do you? Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I try not to get into those debates, but I get it. I understand why people are purists and hardcore about it because at my core, I am a purist about vintage tiki. Like the stuff in my collection, 95% of it has to fit that aesthetic, or I just don't want it. I have some things that don't, but for the most part, it does.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, like I got Waco lamps behind me, and I'm sitting in a Waco bar. Like the vintage stuff really is where it's at for me.
Same here. And yeah. But one of the things, so just in case anybody is not familiar, would you mind elaborating on the difference between the Tiki Classics line and the Katiki line?
The Katiki line, well, see, the Tiki Classics, like I said, it started to veer off into some things that weren't necessarily what I had envisioned with Tiki Classics, with the reimagining vintage Tiki stuff. And I wanted to put out some of those ideas that I had, some things that I wanted to do that I didn't necessarily have time to do, and I wanted to make them super affordable. And so I started the Katiki Classic Mugs line, which is a tribute to the legendary Kahiki. I used their font and changed it to Katiki, and took some of those ideas I had and just got them kind of more mass produced, factory produced, where I could get them in people's hands super cheap. And I did. I sold them cheaper than I think anybody ever. So that was the difference. Is the Katiki stuff is for the most part imported factory made products. The Tiki Classics line is mostly handmade stuff by me. There is a little bit of crossover between the two. But for the most part, Tiki Classics, if it's got that name on it, I made it. Except for the Banana Bob, I didn't make that. And if it says Katiki, it was most likely made in a factory.
Yeah.
But again, there's some crossover with that too. I have some Katiki products now that I'm making, hand making, because it fits into the Katiki line. I know it gets very confusing for people. I confuse myself with it sometimes. I might have to just pick one or the other at some point just to save the confusion. But yeah, that was the initial goal, was to get factory made imported versions of the vintage reimaginations that I wanted, but to do them super cost effective for people.
Yeah. And for anyone who has not checked out your Katiki line, I have the first Coup mug that you did about a year and a half ago.
That was the first one. Yeah, that was the first Katiki mug. Yeah.
Yeah, I have it in the light blue color. And if anyone hasn't checked it out, I mean, like when we say that affordable or like factory, don't let that turn off any interest of buying these, because I use that one all the time.
Cool.
It's fantastic. And again, you cannot beat that price.
Oh no, and they're good quality. They're not. It's not. When I say affordable and cost effective, I don't mean they're cheap. They're sturdy stoneware quality mugs. But the goal for that Katiki line wasn't to just make a bunch of money and just mass produce things. I just wanted to make my ideas that I didn't have time to do and just get them made, at a good price point and get them into people's hands at a good price point. Because I saw with everybody else how the mug prices were just kind of going up and up and up. And I looked at the numbers and the math and what it would take to get these made. And I just thought, yeah, it doesn't need to be that high. Like, it's just for fun. I'm doing this for fun.
Yeah.
Let's make it affordable. Like this right here. I got one sitting here. This is the Castaways mug.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This was a tribute to the Tiki that was it was out front of the Castaways Casino here in Las Vegas, which it was where the Mirage is now, which they're tearing down to build a Hard Rock. But in the 60s, this was a Howard Hughes property. This Tiki stood out front, and I put the Castaways logo on the back. I wanted to make a tribute to that. This is something I wanted to hand make. I actually did hand make a version of it at one point, which is a big monster version.
Yeah.
This is the handmade one I made, but I wanted to make a bunch of them and make them super affordable. So, I mean, I think I charged $35 with free shipping for this mug. I mean, I don't know how you can beat that.
No, and even the like you go on Amazon, you find like those knockoff ones. You'll find, I mean, there's still 20 some odd dollars to get one of them.
Sure.
And so, I mean, for anybody listening, again, it's spend the extra few dollars and get yourself a great mug from you.
I agree. Thank you.
So when it comes to your creative process of how to decide on what mug you're making next, how does that go? Is it just kind of, I know I've always wanted to do X mug and I'm going to make it, or is it you actually have to you have certain bars you like pulling your inspiration from, like the Kahiki, like you said.
Well, with me, it's a lot of because of my vintage tiki knowledge and the research and the obsession with it that I've had for several years. There's a lot of imagery already in my head, and there's a lot of things that I would see over the years where I would see a logo from an old bar from the 60s, some just random tiki logo that wasn't a super famous one, and I would just go, that needs to be a mug. Somebody
Yeah.
should make that into a mug. I wasn't a mug maker at the time. It was just a thought I had. And once I started making ceramics, I just kept a notebook, and anytime a thought popped into my head, I would see a random object and go, yeah, you know what? Somebody needs to make that. And I would just jot it down. And at this point, I have 500 ideas in that book. Yeah, obviously they're not all going to get made, but every now and then I scroll through them and I try to plan what I think my next one should be. And that's really it. It's a lot of the visual aid. I see things and go, yeah, there should be some sort of version of that in a mug. And if I have the time, I get to it and I make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm a sucker for vintage bucket mugs. I think I have way too many of the Harveys at Lake Tahoe,
Sure.
to a point where I don't even display all of them because I have too many. So when you
Yeah.
did the Tiki Bob Chow and Grog bucket mug, I jumped on that immediately.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of those ideas where one day I was thinking about those bucket mugs and I have a million of them too, or I did. I just thought, God, there's a lot of bars back then that didn't have this mug made. So many did,
Yeah.
but there's so many that didn't. And so I said somebody should recreate those. And that kind of sparked that idea. And the first one for me, it had to be Tiki Bob's because Tiki
Yeah.
Bob's is so popular. And so I worked with Mike Biggs to kind of design that and get it made. And that was originally going to be a factory made Katiki mug. That's actually being made by me. So again, that's a little bit of the crossover confusion where people have. So I try to explain on my website each mug and who makes it, where it gets made, and just try to keep that information straight because it gets a little wonky. But
Yeah.
that Tiki Bob mug that's me. I'm doing those, and yeah, it turned out great. I love them. I have probably 30 more of those bucket mugs in my head that I want to do from different bars that
Yeah.
didn't use them. I haven't announced it, but the next one I think is going to be the Luau 400. That classic Luau 400 tribal face.
You know, you say that, and it's very convenient timing because the Exoticon auction just happened, and
Yeah.
I was trying to get. They had a Luau 400 mug. I was trying to get it,
Mhm.
but too rich for my bloods.
Yeah,
It went for a lot more. That's that's probably my favorite classic mug.
me too. Me too. I recently just sold mine not too long ago. One of those things I regret, but I had a massive purge where I sold off most of my vintage collection
Yeah,
just so I could make room to build a bar in my house. I frankly just had too much stuff. I needed to move on from it. Had it for a lot of years, enjoyed it. Time to do something a little different. But yeah, I love that Luau 400 mug. That's a top 10 vintage mug for me.
yeah.
I love that design. I love that simple tribal face with the luau. It's just awesome. So I think I'm 90% sure the next bucket mug is going to be Luau 400.
I'll definitely keep an eye out for that. When I was designing like my bar's logo, that was the inspiration for
Oh,
it.
really? Really cool. Cool.
Yeah,
It's such a great logo. I think I'm picturing it in my head, and I think the shield face
yeah,
that's going to be on two sides, and the opposite sides are just going to be that Luau 400 script. I think
yeah.
that's how I'm going to design it. I'm picturing it in my head. It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
I know this. I don't know. This might be getting in the weeds. Is there any issue
Sure.
with using these bars, like the names, or like I imagine nobody owns the copyright anymore? Is there any issue with that or anything?
No, well, that's another thing too with this vintage stuff is you kind of have to have that knowledge on what still exists, what families still exist, who's got vested interest in these things that existed back in the day. And there's frankly not a ton because a lot of these bars kind of came and went, and
Yeah,
a lot of them went under in the 70s or 80s. So there's not a lot of people sitting around 30, 40 years later worrying about somebody using their logo. There are exceptions. There are some ideas I had and I was actually discussing with the late Tiki Rob about one of those and
yeah,
an idea I had, and he also had the same idea at the same time. We were talking about it, and And he did some research and found out that the family had some interest in that and they weren't cool with it. So we nixed it. But I'm 1,000% respectful of that. I would never step on anybody's toes.
Yeah.
I haven't done a lot of those yet. The castaways, the only logos I've used so far are Tiki Bobs and castaways. Tiki Bobs, as you know, 1 billion people have done different variations of Tiki Bobs. So
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about that one. The castaways shut down in 1986 or something, and it was inside a casino, and there was a casino that's just defunct, and there's not a lot of like copyrights on the castaways and castaways merchandise. Nobody's looking for that or buying this. I wasn't too concerned about that one. And again, I make things in such small quantities too that I'm not super concerned about that. But I do my research. I
Yeah.
make sure that I'm not, again, like stepping on any toes or insulting anybody. So yeah, there's a lot of time that goes into that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it would be pretty rough. You're halfway through production and find out somebody's grandchildren's really annoyed about a limited run of blogs that you're doing.
I think about that from time to time, but yeah, again, you just got to do your research. Tiki
Yeah.
Central is very helpful. A lot of the old Tiki Central posts, you go on there and search these things. People have done deep dives on these places and who owned them and who's still alive and blah, blah, blah. And you can find a lot of information on there. It's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know you are probably, like you said, you have a ton of projects coming up. You have a lot of things planned, whether that's already ongoing or just written down somewhere. Do you ever do any like vending or anything like that? Any events that people could possibly see these in person at?
I don't, and I'll tell you why. When I get asked this question, it sounds like a cocky answer. I swear it's not, but I just don't have anything to sell because when I make something and list it for sale, it sells out pretty quickly. So I just don't have the inventory
Yeah.
to do vending. We had one Tiki marketplace here in Vegas last year that my buddy Jimmy here put on. He's in our local group, Sin City Tiki. It was pretty successful. We had a lot of people come and show up for it, and I managed to set aside some things for that. But it was right down the street from my house, so it was very simple for me to travel and do vending. I just don't see where I have the stuff to sell. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if you told me tomorrow there was the biggest Tiki vending event in the history of the world, and every Tiki person on planet Earth is going to be there, and I have a free spot, I would be like, well, I don't have anything to sell. I have a
Yeah.
handful of things, but not worth vending. So it's not really. I would love to do it. I go to Tiki Oasis every year in the marketplace, and I walk around and go, man, I'd love to do this, but I would have to like set aside things for a whole year, and I don't know. It's something I think about and I always talk about. It'll probably happen at some point, but for now, no. I just have too many projects that I need to get caught up on, and worrying about vending in person is just too much for me.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's definitely fair enough. And if selling things out too fast, I mean, that's not a bad issue to have.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not
Yeah.
complaining. Again,
No,
I hate that being my answer, but it's just the truth. Like
no, that makes
I don't have
sense.
anything. Like if you went in my shop right now and looked around at the inventory, there's not a lot in there. Maybe 20 or 30 mugs I have available. So I mean, what am I going to do? Kind of travel to sell those mugs? It just doesn't seem worth it.
Instead of selling out pretty quickly online, they'll sell out really quickly in person. Then you're just, I guess
They
you're hanging out
will.
for the rest of the day.
Hopefully, yeah. But I would love to do that. I just
Yeah.
don't have. It's not part of my business plan right now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So you mentioned some of the other ideas for mugs you have. Do you have anything else that other people can kind of look forward to? Any other projects or anything that you're doing?
Man, I have one massive project I'm working on right now. It's going to take up all my time, and it's going to be a really, really cool project. It's not a mug. It's not a cocktail vessel or a lamp or anything like that. It is ceramic. I can't say what it is. I wish I could, but only because it's not done yet. I don't want to hype it up and then not be able to pull it off. It's something that I've been thinking about for 3 years. Very tricky and complicated to do, but it's something that people will use as decor in their home bars and commercial restaurants. And I'm trying really hard to get caught up on other things so I can start it. It's in the early process. The plan is in place. It took me years to come up with a solution to make this happen. And I've got it in my head, got it on paper. I just don't have the time to do it right now. But when I do, I will announce it. But I think it's going to be really, really cool. Something nobody's done. People have done, but not versions like this. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be awesome. I wish I could talk about it. I know it's just a big tease. I just can't because I don't want it to not come to fruition. Then I'll get like, oh, what happened to this? I mean, I want to make sure I can make it happen first.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
And no pressure. But I am running through of like, all right, not a mug, not for cocktails, it's not a lamp, but it's for decor. I'm like, I'm trying to figure it out.
No.
You know, I guess we'll all just have to wait and be surprised.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at
The people close to me know what it is, and they're all super excited about it. I just need the time. I just need the time to work on it. And I just, I have a full-time job. I don't do this full-time. I do this on my free time when I get home from work for a couple hours, and then on my days off, I spend all day working on this stuff. So time is a major, major issue right now. Yeah. Not enough. There's just not enough.
So where can people find you on either social media or if they want to go buy a mug?
My website is tikiclassics.com. All my Tiki Classic stuff and my Katiki stuff are all on that one website. They used to be separated. Again, I tried to end some of that confusion by putting them all in one spot. So tikiclassics.com is where everything is at. I do most of my social media on Instagram. My Instagram is Tiki_classics. Or Katiki mugs. You can look up Katiki mugs, one word. That's on there also. But I use the Tiki Classics more often. And I just started a new page for our new home tiki bar that we just completed a few weeks ago, called the J Tao Lava Lounge. JAYTAO Lava Lounge. It's a confusing name, but I like it that way because people don't know what the heck it means. And then when I explain it to them, they get a kick out of it. Yeah, but I have a new Instagram for that, the J Tao Lava Lounge. If you want to go follow that, I'll be posting all the photos and videos. I've got some cool people coming over this week because Viva Las Vegas is in town. So I'm going to have some cool tiki people over, and I'll make sure I post a bunch of photos and the shenanigans we get up to over here. But Tiki Classics, Tiki_classics. That's my main page.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you sitting down with me, and we'll keep an eye out for either the Luau 400 or anything else you got going on.
That one's coming. That one. I promise you that one will come. When I don't know, but that is happening because if I'm excited about it, it'll happen.
Yeah, and then also the mystery project that we'll all be thinking about until you possibly announce. Yeah,
I'm hoping to announce that soon. I'm hoping real soon. We'll see.
Fair enough. Well, thanks again. Cheers.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you again to Kevin Crossman and Will Fugate for joining us on this week's episode. We had a lot of fun talking with you guys, and we really appreciate you sharing your not only experience, but your love and passion for the tiki world.
Yeah, we had a great time talking with you both. And again, go check out Will's Instagram. Really wanted to plug that. He has a very exciting new project going on with some Chinese jade tiles that normally is special enough when someone's selling those, but these ones are going to be custom made for your bar. He just posted about it. Go check out all the details. I don't want to take away or put words into his mouth, but also check out their websites for Kevin Crossman, ultimatemaitai.com, and for Will's main website, it is tikiclassics.com. And as always, we're going to have the show notes down at the bottom, and for their social media, anywhere where you can follow them, purchase their stuff, or just show them some love and follow their journeys.
So last episode, we reported that we would be traveling to the Creaky Tiki event in Pennsylvania, and I am pleased to report that we had a fantastic time. We enjoyed, antique shopping in the morning, close to our home here in Maryland, and then we drove on up to Pennsylvania and had a fantastic time seeing High Tide at the DJ booth and a lot of our other, familiar faces around, from the people over at Maggie's Farm to Rita's Last Weekend and everyone else. It was a really great weekend to just be surrounded by tiki people.
It is one of the easiest days of the year to separate the money from my wallet over to a vendor. We saw High Tide and DJing, and they had records for sale. I couldn't walk out with the Surfers 45 that they had just released a couple of months ago, as well as a couple other records I've been meaning to get, all of which are fantastic. Of course, check out High Tide Records. And like Ellie said, there were some other great vendors. I picked up a really awesome Trader Vic's menu and then dinner card from 1966 from the Boston Trader Vic's location. I also picked up a really great early 60s Hawaii Kai Moai mug. So, it's also not about what you get, but like Ellie said, it's about the people. And we just had a great morning and a great day and hope to see you all again soon.
You can find us at the Tiki Talk Show on Instagram now. We have a new page specifically for the show, so be sure to check us out there. As always, we are on Instagram at @KonaCove_home Tiki Bar. And if you're interested in coming on the show, you can send us an email at thetikitalkshow@gmail.com. All of that will be linked in the show notes below, and we'll see you next week.
It was good talking to you.